So hi everybody, my name is Gessho. I'm a senior student here at the Village Zendo, and I'm just so appreciative of everyone who came out today on this rainy, snowy, wintry mix day, and everybody who's appeared online from so many faraway places. And I see some people I haven't seen the faces of in some time, and so that just gives me some real joy and real support, which I need today. So today, I want to talk a bit about the present moment, our national moment here in the United States, and how I'm trying to find a kind of orientation within what's going on. And as I came in this morning, I realized I was feeling much less prepared to speak than I usually do, even though I've worked at it. Bokushu said, well, maybe it's good to be not less prepared. And maybe it is. So maybe you'll get a little bit more raw Gessho than usual. But I also realized that the reason I think, that I'm less prepared is that I'm afraid to speak about this. It's scary. And everything that's going on has been, for me, upsetting and frightening. And it's been difficult to find a way to respond and to navigate inside it. I feel very much like I don't know what to do, and I don't know what to say. For those of you who've been around here for a while, you may have heard that the 3 pure precepts as expressed by the Zen Peacemaker Order, which is part of our larger community, are not knowing, bearing witness, and responsive action. So you think we'd be kind of good at not knowing by now. But not knowing can be scary, and I'm feeling that very much. The actual, not like the not knowing, but the actual not knowing feels very different. But when everybody began to gather in the space and online, I realized I felt a bit differently. That I felt like instead of some kind of abstract talk that I was going to give, suddenly I was speaking to you. So that changes everything. Even if I don't know what to say, we're here together in this mess. So today I want to talk about care. Care as a way of orienting ourselves, and care as a way of a form of attention. And care as possibly a politically potent thing that's a little bit different from our other kinds of political experience and action, or mine anyway. So care is one of the ways that I'm orienting myself now. The work that we've been studying during this ongo, which is instructions to the cook in a number of different forms, beginning with Dogen's essay from the 13th century. Dogen is really talking very literally about the cook in a monastery in that essay, and how that cook should be thought of, treated, how they should act. But we're all taking this collectively as if we are all the cooks in our own worlds. So the way the cook tends to the kitchen of the monastery, we are all tending to our own areas of responsibility in our life. And the attitude that Dogen talks about near the end of the essay, which you probably heard about in some of the other talks if you've been coming regularly or listening regularly, is a kind of mind which is joyful nurturing or parental, and magnanimous. And that's the way to approach the spheres of responsibility that we have. And for me, all of these are aspects of the mind of care. So the joyful mind is grateful and buoyant. And we all know what it's like, I think, when somebody cares for you who doesn't really want to, who feels resentful. So it's sort of the opposite of that. It's a really genuine gift of care. The nurturing mind, the parental mind, is care, of course, in that literal way, but also it just reminds you of the kind of mind where you leap forward in yourself to care for something that you love. So, you know, when I see the face of my dog, I'm like, oh, that little snout, those little paws, that fur, I love my dog. And there are many things in my life, many people in my life that I love. But the way in which when you just see something or someone you love, that instant kind of joy and connection. And that connection, that non-separation, is part of the magnanimous mind. So the large mind, the self that we are that includes all other beings, the non-separate self, the empty self. And Dogen reminds us that that self is stable and not so easily pushed around by any one thing that's happening. And we're in a situation where our attention is being jerked around a lot, if you happen to be looking at the news at all. And some people I know aren't during this time looking at the news at all. It's too painful. But this kind of attention that's easily moved, like from place to place, is very different from the kind of attention of care. So care requires a great steadiness of attention. It brings your focus into your own sphere of responsibility. Your focus is where your action is. And I think that that kind of attention is worth cultivating, even in a crisis, maybe especially in a crisis. When you care for something like, you know, taking care of a child or a pet or an apartment or a garden, or whether you're at work taking care of a document or a file, or whether you're writing, whatever you're doing, it requires you to hold that thing in mind in a particular way. And return to it if your attention is taken away elsewhere. Return to it just the way if you're sitting in zazen and you find yourself distracted somewhere, your task is simply to return to the breath, to the moment, to counting the breath. And there's a kind of creativity in care as you're attending to something real in front of you. Things go awry, but you creatively find ways of responding. And that creativity, I think, is really helpful to us right now. So I feel like now is a time for all of us to consider caring for what we care about. I've been being inspired by this particular artist named Meirle Laderman Ukeles, who you may not know about, but I'll tell you a little bit about. She was born in 1939, so she's currently alive. She's 85 or 86. And she went to art school in the 60s at Pratt here in New York. She made some sculpture and assemblage. That's what was really happening at the time. One of her teachers was Robert Rauschenberg. And she was making these sculptures that involved stuffing things into fabric and that required a lot of work, but they also fell apart, and so they also required a lot of maintenance. And then she and her husband, she was done with art school, and they had a baby. And suddenly her life was obviously completely different. And all of her maintenance energy was being put into keeping this child alive and well. And she said, in an interview, she said, "It was a time of crisis for me. I mean, I wanted that baby. It wasn't that someone pushed me into having a baby, but all my heroes, the artists I was trying to be like, Jackson Pollock, Marcel Duchamp, Mark Rothko, didn't have to deal with the maintenance of motherhood. Here I was changing diapers, saying to myself, 'Where are you, Jackson? Where are you, Marcel?' I felt like they abandoned me. They had nothing to say to me. They wouldn't be caught dead doing what I was doing as a mother. I felt like I was falling into that kind of not knowing, maybe. And then she goes on to say, one day, it was October 1969, I had an epiphany. I said to myself, you're the boss of your freedom. You're not a copier of Marcel who can't help you anymore. If you're the boss of your freedom, then you have the right to name anything as art. Marcel gave me that right." This is Marcel Duchamp, who famously declared a lot of non-art items as art. Marcel gave me that right. Maybe she already had it anyway. So that's how I turned my maintenance work into maintenance art. That was it. It was a way to keep my life together. I said to myself, I am an artist. I need to be who I am, and this is who I am. And so then in a kind of white-hot moment of inspiration and actually anger, rage, she wrote a manifesto for what she called maintenance art. And basically she was claiming all of the acts of her actual life as a new form of art in that manifesto. And she began it by laying out a couple of ideas that I think are maybe a little bit helpful for us. One is she distinguished between what she called the death instinct and the life instinct. And this is 1969, so Freudian thought was maybe a little bit more in the air than it is now, so we don't normally think of the death instinct, but I think that was more in the air. So she describes the death instinct as separation, individuality, avant-garde par excellence, to follow one's own path unto death, do your own thing, dynamic change. And contrasts that with the life instinct, unification, we might call it non-separation, the eternal return, the perpetuance and maintenance of the species, survival systems and operations, equilibrium. So she's making a critique of the avant-garde that she had loved, that failed her in this moment as a guide. And she also talks about two separate systems, which she calls development and maintenance. Development, pure individual creation, the new, change, progress, advance, excitement, flight or fleeing. Maintenance, keep the dust off of the pure individual creation. Preserve the new, sustain the change, protect progress, defend and prolong the advance, renew the excitement, repeat the flight. So where she's talking about, she's making a critique of our whole society, but also of art's obsession with change, newness, and the individual. We can also think a little bit about, this made me think about Silicon Valley's ethics of explosive growth and of acceleration, of destruction, of dominance. They're saying move fast and break things. And though Silicon Valley had idealistic origins, it's really been taken over by its own vast wealth. That optimism has been transformed into a kind of ruthlessness, I think. And right now, I think that same thing is being applied to our government. Moving fast and breaking government is what's going on. And it remains to be seen how far they will succeed. And I think, the economic system we live in, which is also an ethical system under capitalism doesn't care, and it can't really care. It has other things it has to answer to. It is actually indifferent to what any individual person might love or might need. So if we want to care about things, we can't rely on these larger systems to care about them for us or care for them for us. Meirle says, I became a maintenance worker because I became a mother. The thing about maintenance is that if you decide that something has value, then you want to maintain it. You have to do a series of tasks to keep it alive. I loved that baby. I fell madly in love with that baby, but I didn't know anything about being a mother, about how to make sure my child was healthy and robust. Whether it's a child, an institution, or a city, it's all the same, or a nation, we could say. If you want them to thrive, you have to do a lot of maintenance, a lot. And so the artwork that she went on to do, and still does to this day, is really all focused on this idea of maintenance. So one thing that happened is that she became the artist in residence of the New York City Sanitation Department. It was an unsalaried position, but she did that for about 40 years. And she did many projects with the workers of the sanitation department, partly to show what it was that they did, to value what it was that they did. One of them was called Touch Sanitation. And so she, over the course of a couple of years, touched the hand of every single sanitation worker. And this she wanted to do because we think of those hands as being made dirty somehow by that garbage that they touch. And she wanted to shake hands with every person, look them in the eye, and thank them for their work. That was about like 9,000 or 10,000 people. And she also collected their stories and shared them in exhibitions. She was part of exhibitions where her artwork as the exhibition was simply to clean the space of the institution and to visibly show its cleaning and its maintenance. And then she also would interview some of the people who did that as their regular work and showed aspects of their regular work to the public. She also did giant outdoor ballets of maintenance and construction equipment, moving gracefully in beautiful patterns. So she did many different kinds of work, but to show the skill, the importance, and the value of maintenance work, both her own and all the people who do that as their regular task. So I'm finding her very inspiring in the moment. And that brings me back to the question of kind of what can we do? Who are we in this story? And the thing that I would like to invite you to do is to pay some close attention to your actual ordinary life and to notice what it is that you do. What are your spheres of responsibility? What are you taking care of? And to think about the way in which what you're already doing in your life, what you're already taking care of, your tasks, embody your deepest values. And if you find that they don't, maybe it's a time to consider that. But I think for many of us, what we do ordinarily is very important, actually. And, one of the things that I'm noticing is that one of the things I do is take care of this space. I'm only one of many, many people who do. I was trying to guess how many. Is it 75? Is it 100? Who do some one or another task to keep this online space and this physical space open. That's, maybe they pick up the mail, or they clean the space, or they open it for sitting, or open it online and host it online, as Kondo is doing today. Or they process the Dharma talks and so that they can be posted later, or they give the Dharma talks, or they take out the trash. There are just so many tasks and so many people who make this space alive. And so this is one of those spaces of care that I'm really noticing. And I also feel like every single person who shows up, whether it's the first time you've ever been here, whether you only come once, whether you're just here right now, you're in a just very literal way right now supporting me, but you are supporting the maintenance of the Dharma. This is what we say at the beginning of the Dharma talk when we do that chant, the Gatan opening the sutra. Now we maintain this. We together maintain this. And it has been maintained for us for thousands of years, hundreds of years, and by the countless acts, many very mundane acts of people who valued this teaching and this practice and this awakeness. And I'm feeling especially grateful to them for that maintenance, and to you all for that maintenance. And the other thing we might consider is, as you look around your life, is there anything that is in your life that you directly care about that's currently under threat of violence or of denigration, of legal sanction? There's so much that's under threat right now. I'm guessing the answer is probably yes for most of us. And that makes the work that you do especially important. And that could be, do you work in healthcare? Healthcare of all kinds is under threat. Are you a scientist? Science is under threat. Do you work in a university? Universities are under threat. Do you teach children? The teaching, education, the whole idea of education is under threat. Do you work in a bookstore or a library? Do you write? Do you make art? Do you help administer something? Do you work in a national park? There's so many kinds of tasks which very directly bear on what is being threatened right now. And I think these areas that we have direct responsibility for also give us a kind of much more direct and intimate knowledge. So there are things that are happening out there, and we know that in some larger absolute sense there's no out there, but there are things that are happening that are not directly, that you're not directly interacting with in some way every day. And it's hard to know much about them, really. You can find out about them through the news, but it's mediated. You find out through the media. And there's an immediate kind of knowledge in your sphere of care that I think is really especially important. This is where we find what is true for us, both in our hearts, what is our true feeling, what is our true knowledge. And I think it's important to really gather that into ourselves and to stand from that kind of direct knowledge. So I think if there's anything that we value, it is really important that we do not leave it to the hands of politicians, however well-meaning some of them may be, and important even that they may be, or they're lobbyists of corporations. We don't want to leave it in their hands. We don't want to leave it in the hands of our capitalist system. We want to leave it in the hands of love, the hands that are joyful, nurturing, magnanimous, and our actual hands. So it may mean, that we are, I'm sure, called to do all the kind of traditional forms of political action right now, contacting your representatives, organizing locally and nationally, maybe protesting. All of those things are familiar and are certainly going to be needed. But I think we should also look at what we're actually doing in our lives as itself politically important and politically potent. Things that we ordinarily don't think of as political, like maintenance and care and protection and preservation. And those are values that we've, I think, by this moment, when I say we, people on the left have kind of ceded to what we used to call conservatives, these values of keeping alive something important from the past. And I don't think we should cede those values at all right now. I think we should stand with them. But these are just what I think, right? So this is just what I think also today. Like, I feel really in the heart of this change and in the heart of not knowing. And so I would say this ordinarily, but I especially say this, it's your own heart that you need to consult, not my words. So I want to close with some words from Rebecca Solnit, who's wrote these just on November 6th, but they've resurfaced. She said, "The fact that we cannot save everything does not mean we cannot save anything. And everything we can save is worth saving. Right now, good friends and good principles are worth gathering in. Remember what you love. Remember what loves you. Remember in this tide of hate what love is. The pain you feel is because of what you love." So I think now is the time for all of us to care for what we care about and to hold steady with our values and convictions and loves, to hold steady with ourselves and our communities, and to hold true.